All right, sorry folks, we'll get started here. They had told us a different room, so we were all waiting up in 202 and wondering why there was no people to listen to this great panel. So I apologize for the confusion. So I think we got it all squared away though now. And so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Mark Kapczynski. I'm a local consultant in the digital media industry here. And I have the honor and pleasure today of hosting our session. We're going to focus and really dive into the weeds on the subject of OTT. Probably means a lot of things to a lot of you and probably to everyone on the panel. So we'll have them hopefully dissect it for you and kind of get into what it's all about. If you have any questions, just we'll save some time for the end. The last like 10, 15 minutes we'll do your questions. So if you have a question, just kind of signal me so like as that time comes up, I'll make sure to call on you and we'll get your questions through as well. So what we'll do is we'll first have the panel kind of introduce themselves, give each of their backgrounds, then we'll kind of dive into some kind of common questions, and then we'll get into a discussion with the panelists, and then from there, like I said, if you have questions, save your questions as we go forward. So with that, we're going to just dive right in. George, you want to kind of kick us off, give us a little bit of your background and your bio?
Cool.
And we'll just go down the row after that.
Hey everyone, George Woolley here representing Gen Z in the flesh. I work for...
George, just make sure you talk into the mic.
Is this working?
Yeah, that's better.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'll start over.
Talk into it. It's okay.
George Woolley, I'm head of originals for Portal A. We are a digital-first production studio and content studio with headquarters in San Francisco and here in Los Angeles. Completely independent company. We do both branded entertainment and original series. We are probably one of our signature shows is the YouTube Rewind, which we do every year, which is kind of known as the Super Bowl of the internet. It comes out in December. It's kind of a nice retrospective on all the cool trends and memes that have come out over the course of the year, and it features both traditional and digital talent. Earlier this year, we premiered a show on Disney Maker Studios called Song Voyage, which featured the Gregory brothers traveling around the world, collaborating with different musicians across the globe. And so basically, a lot of our business is focused on youth-oriented platforms and networks, and we do a lot of work with digital creators to develop vehicles for them for linear as well as digital.
Awesome, thank you, welcome. Harry, you want to go next?
Harry Lang, I'm VP of Product at Hallmark Labs, and Hallmark Labs is the digital arm of Hallmark Cards. We're in Santa Monica, and we create several products, direct-to-consumer products. I oversee user experience and development for our SVOD, which is called Feelin'. It's distributed across every device. Pretty much, it's a subscription video on demand service, and it's soon to be rebranded Hallmark Movies Now as part of a new relaunch of the service. My background is, before this, I've been there about 3 years, overseeing product. Prior to this, I was at Trailer Park, overseeing mobile product for Trailer Park, and then prior to that, I spent about 18 years heading up product for Paramount Pictures in our video games group.
Terrific, welcome. Dave, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm the one who switched hitting here for the previous Dave.
We have a substitute today,
yeah.
So Dave, Todd Sherman couldn't make it, so we have Dave Hutchinson instead. So.
Another local boy. Dave Hutchinson, I'm with PPI Releasing. We're a TV syndication company just down the street in Venice. For those of you who may not be familiar with TV syndication, there are basically three ways you get a TV show on the air across the country. One is to do a national broadcast deal with an NBC, a CBS, or an ABC, Fox, et cetera, or a national cable deal, Lifetime, A&E, Discovery channels, and so forth. Syndication is the act of taking a already produced or soon-to-be produced show and selling it station by station, market by market across the country until you create a national ad hoc network, which gives national brand advertisers sort of a third choice for advertising. And so while that's pretty traditional, again, we make most of our money through good old traditional linear Nielsen-rated TV shows. I wear a couple of different hats, including operations, which of course naturally includes all things digital, and with a long background to some of these gentlemen. A lot of digital, SVOD, VOD, going back to the days of MPEG and interactive television, which we'll probably get into a little bit later.
Or
MPEG, Dave, it was
Yeah.
like you're reaching, Galen,
or
Old school.
syndication in the digital platform world, as we call it, free. I'm Galen DiTilio, Director of Business Development and Strategic Partnerships for Dailymotion. We're a platform that I would say is fairly supplementary to what YouTube does, but mainly we're an OVP solution that provides video technology services, hosting and bandwidth services to mostly digital publications. When they have video content, they can also syndicate via our platform. So we're considered both an OTT platform, and we do OTT syndication through applications. I actually just took over our OEM relationships with all the smart TV distributors, Roku, Apple TV, and a number of others.
Great, welcome again. Xavier?
Hi, everybody. Xavier Kochar, founder of the Video Genome Project. The Video Genome Project is a structured data company operating in the video curation space, that is search, recommendation, discovery, and kind of the big blanket term, personalization. Really for any video content, we decided to focus on over-the-top video content and work ultimately ended up partnering with an OTT player. Partnering's too loose a word. An OTT player ended up acquiring us last year, and so now we are powering a lot of the personalization products for Hulu.
Terrific. Well, welcome all of you. Just a quick show of hands. Who's like a producer or a content creator? Anyone? A few folks? Anyone like tech startup kind of community folks? A few? Anyone from the advertising world? A little bit? Okay. So that's kind of roughly who we have. So guys, we're going to start things off as we kind of talked about in the prep call. We'll pick on you first again. I
Right on.
promise not to do that the whole afternoon. But George, why don't you tell us a little bit about your definition of OTT? It means so many things, I think, to so many different people, different business models, different types of content. How do you define OTT with the stuff that you're working on, and what's your view on it?
Right. Well, I guess the general definition of any type of content delivery that's sort of sidesteps cable and delivers directly to consumers digitally is, I guess, what I would call OTT. For us as a company, we're definitely focused on working with networks that are catering to sort of millennial and Gen Z audiences. So that's Facebook, Go90, Fullscreen, YouTube is a big partner of ours, and some of the linear networks as well, Fuse, MTV, and Comedy Central as well. Yeah, so I mean, it is a pretty wide-ranging definition, I guess, for OTT, but I guess that would be mine.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. It's kind of a catch-all term, and I think it's evolved over time. Where originally, I think a lot of people were using it to describe TV everywhere, with authentication and getting channel network programming on Roku devices or other devices, and it kind of has evolved into something, a catch-all for us it's subscription video on demand. It could be AVOD, it could be TVOD, it can be TV everywhere, it can be Facebook, YouTube. It's really kind of a generic term for all things streaming media that's, like you said, outside of a traditional cable delivery system.
Yeah. So and also, I mean, you guys chose to create your own app too.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this dichotomy of like, do you partner with like Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, or build your own even too, right?
Right. I think
it's
really
factored in.
Yeah, it really depends on what's going to separate you from everyone else, since there's so many choices out there. People are only going to subscribe and watch so many services, so you have to have something that's going to be somewhat unique and have something that you can't get somewhere else. So for us, it's as Hallmark, it's Hallmark movies and licensing of films for our service too that have that same fit that same genre, that same feeling of what a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie might be. So we'll license other things as well to kind of fit that mold. So for us, it works because we're not trying to be Netflix, we're not trying to be Amazon or Hulu. We're trying to be all things to all people. We're serving a very specific audience, and they love it.
Just final follow-up, and then we'll move on to Dave. So do you have, is all the content that's available on the Hallmark television channel also now in your
Not all of it
OTT
yet.
service, or is it sort of a
There's a mix.
program different?
Yeah, there's some programming differences. We don't have all the content on our SVOD as we do on the channel. So there's some overlap, and there's also content on the SVOD that's not on the channel, things that we license.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Another differentiation.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Hutch, you want to go next?
My answer is kind of short and sweet. To me, you know, OTT has been sort of cable television, but served up over the internet protocol with a lot more functionality.
So I'm going to pick on you. What kind of functionality, Dave?
On streaming, on demand, of course, we include mobile in that
But
definition.
is it just streaming existing programming that you have elsewhere, or is it
All of the above, my friend. That's what I mean.
shopping for an example?
Yeah, no, but I mean, literally, that's the kind of thing that we're wrestling with, is that it's streaming, it's on demand, it's long form, it's short form, it's kind of, you know, it's over the top, as you mentioned earlier, over the traditional, you know, cable architecture in that sense, or over traditional broadcast in that sense, although more and more broadcast is covered through the cable architecture. But, you know, this is such a hot button definition, obviously, why you asked it first. I mean, that's my fast answer, because it is so inclusive, I think.
Gail?
I might have a little bit of a different perspective because I come from mostly a digital publication background, and a vast majority of digital publications would not consider themselves OTT for their own content. So I would call it distribution of product or content outside of your endemic or proprietary owned and operated properties.
Wow.
Like that one.
It's kind of broad, but I think it gets the general gist of how content syndicators or creators of content who are looking to distribute think of it.
Yeah. And so I guess, how are you guys looking at it? I mean, is your goal just that, you know, content everywhere?
Well, we have to yes, we have to present ourselves as two different things, and I'm on the content acquisition side and the OEM OTT distribution side. So we have to consider ourselves an OTT destination for premium content from distributors like CNN and Condé Nast and IGN and Ziff Davis, CBSI. While at the same time, we have to syndicate our applications to WebOS for LG Electronics smart TVs, for Vizio TVs, for Sony, Samsung, Roku, Apple TV.
Got it. Thanks. Xavier? How do you define this?
Everyone got it. So, I mean, just here I'll offer something at risk of jeopardizing the name of the panel, but I think we should stop calling it OTT. And the reason is because, well, the reason is because over the time it was really just it was a technology. It was really just a kludgy. At one point, it was a kludgy technology term as to how things were delivered, right? And then now, and it stayed niche. So it's like, so the technology got linked to the content, but now it's just a thing. Like now it's just like, we don't say like, oh, do you have an internet company? But we used to say that 15 years ago because it was a new technology distribution, technology and medium. So now, I mean, it's funny. Earlier on the panel, like they just they said anything that's not delivered via cable. Technologically, that's accurate. So you go, it doesn't include the cable companies. No, that's not right, because every cable company and every satellite operator now, guess how what they're investing in. They're delivering their content over the top. So it's just like a thing now. It's just so. I don't know. It's just how technology is.
I'd agree, because I think if you ask anyone outside of this room what does OTT mean, the average consumer would just be like, oh, that's completely foreign to them. They have no idea what OTT means.
It might have been relevant even like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, because there were companies that were content companies that were only delivering over the top. But now it's just a better, more efficient way to deliver. So, you know.
Well, like Harry said, I mean, like they still have their cable channel and they're still doing this, and they create different experiences on both sort of mediums or forms of distribution, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on the cable side, like they don't. I mean, at the cable networks, it would be phenomenal, right? And Harry, you can probably vouch for this, that everyone wants to lose their dependency from the cable operators. The cable operators just spent billions of dollars over like 50 years laying down pipe, or throwing up satellite. And now if you can go around them, then you don't have to deal with all that stuff. And of course, the biggest, most recent example of that is Disney, right? Disney just, by the way, Disney's even going around an OTT player, right, to go direct. So that's why I kind of think OTT we should sort of.
So, go ahead, Galen.
I would say that I would take it even a step further and say the MVPDs consider themselves OTT as well, because they are now distributing YouTube applications via their cable boxes. They're starting to think about distributing Netflix and Hulu and other applications via the cable boxes. They no longer really consider themselves just cable. Yeah. They also consider themselves competitive in the same product circumstances as Roku.
Yeah, and the coexistence now is sort of baseband video, which is your traditional sort of, under the top, if you will, commingling with the Internet Protocol, IPTV. And obviously everybody now, from cable to broadcasters to the major studios in this transitional phase, broadcast stations included, of kind of drafting off of the existing baseband video, but of course extending the reach of that signal, if you will, with IP.
So is it just about streaming content now anywhere and everywhere? Is that like the problem being solved here? And if so, I guess like seems like we've solved it. So now what, George? Any?
Yeah, I mean, we have solved that part, and but I think that has disrupted the television cable model. But as we just talked about, like the cable companies are investing in the actual digital distribution of these projects as well. So I think we're kind of like.
I guess sort of where my question is like, maybe Harry, you'll jump in on this. It's like, is the big goal here to just stop distribution of content over time on cable? Like, is that like what we're really talking about? And just everything's sort of IP streaming, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I not having worked for a cable company, or I actually don't even work for the channel. We're a different division, so it's hard to say what their end goal is. But I just me personally, I don't think that's kind of the end goal, but it might just be another alternative. Although if you look at the numbers, I think maybe down the line that could be a possibility.
So what goal do you end up having with this new fill-in service that you have? Is it to try to broaden your audience, enhance your audience?
Broaden the audience and delivering very specific content to them, that they can consume whenever they want.
Right. That sort of bespoke delivery of what you want, and you can choose to see what you want when you want at any time. Yeah.
So it feels like, and Galen, maybe you'll touch on this. I mean, we kind of talked about this, but it feels like, this is solving part of a challenge for like cord nevers or younger folks that just don't want the traditional aggregation of channels provided to them. They want more flexibility, I guess?
Yeah, and that's why Dailymotion and YouTube were founded a month from each other 11, 12 years ago. What is it now? They were founded to solve that problem of how do you access content with a sense of immediacy, hyperactivity. And so that's how OTT has become so distributed as a solution for everybody now, is because you're trying to solve for that solution. You go to where the audience is, and when you have a bunch of cord nevers who want to access that content and aren't able to, you create a method for them to access it, and you can monetize them.
Got it. So how is, programming then changing for all of this, or does it even change, or is it the same content just repackaged differently, or what's different? Who wants to?
For us, it's pretty much the same. Since that's the way we're set up, and that's how our business runs. Our business model runs as long form content, episodic content. For us, the programming is very similar to the programming that's been on the channels, is serving a very specific audience. Movies and TV shows. So we're not like. I think programming may change for other types of services, YouTube, Dailymotion, but for us, that's what works for us. So we stick to the same style of programming.
And I guess coming from the product UX side, do you have to put more functionality though into that engagement? Or is it just still...
There's recommendations, personalization. You want to try to serve up. Discovery can be a challenge for people. Serving up content for binge watchers so that automatically queues up the next episode or automatically queues up a recommended movie that they might want to watch next. Something that we can do that you can't get on, the linear side.
Right.
So for us, it's we do want to try to take advantage of things like that.
Okay. George, what about you, and how you guys think about the content that you guys are programming?
Yeah, well, it seems like obviously there's a lot of different models out there that people are trying, and I do think that sort of the bigger streaming folks, Netflix, Apple with their recent hires, they are kind of looking at Hulu, of course, looking at this as a sort of similar programming model to cable. But I think that there's also some interesting and exciting things happening in the mid-form premium space where there is a desire to reach sort of a demo who wants kind of highly creative, new, different content. And so that's kind of who we've been working with a lot, because for us, we think that the way that we can differentiate our brand is to look for ways to, disrupt the way that you're telling stories or how you're delivering stories, whether that be mashing up genres together, or having an innovative approach built into the actual show to drive marketing traffic out of it. Like you can have little breakout segments that will help, get people back to the main program. Which I think you see in that with like James Corden's show. Carpool Karaoke is the big driver of that show, and I don't really think nearly as many people are watching the actual show as are watching Carpool Karaoke. So when you can have, I think that's also what this sort of digital space is too. Like you need stuff that's going to be kind of changing and quick and hitting these young audiences so that they're not tuning out, over the course of the show.
Hutch, how has your business evolved with programming, and are you having to do new things now to take advantage of this opportunity, or
Where it makes sense. I mean, what's interesting, we probably all agree on too, that this whole OTT space is very noisy, very competitive, so promotion's a bitch, right? And it's always been an advantage in my experience working for various networks and both sides of the sort of table for television production, distribution, marketing, ad sales, research, et cetera. It's a hell of a lot easier to sort of be in the streaming space if you're already in the linear television space. I think that's probably pretty true. That said, it makes for a wonderful sort of a baseline or springboard for little nuggets that are very kind of stream friendly and meme friendly, and there's a lot of evidence of that. But also the economics. Eventually, you have to kind of get down to the pesky economics of it all. Whereas, for any kind of a program to sort of spawn some viral video, you kind of need that day to day, week in, week out kind of production environment of the continuity to allow for that traction, to have enough time to be around to spawn those shorter form clips and so forth. So I think there's a coexistence, obviously. I'd be curious to show of hands in this room if there's anybody in this room who has actually stopped watching all linear broadcast. For most of it, it's a mix. A lot of people watch the...
Sitting next to you.
So you don't watch any news programs? No streaming news programs?
Nope.
No Sunday morning programs?
Nope.
Saturday morning cartoons?
Nope.
Well, there's one example.
Those don't exist anymore, by the way.
I know. That's irony.
How'd you hear about the fires then?
But
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but it's clearly in transition, and the major media companies who are living in that transitional space, obviously they're going to continue to mine the dollars that can be, siphoned into the traditional Nielsen-rated cable and broadcast universe, while extending the reach of that signal, as I said earlier, with the new expanding platforms of web and mobile, and they'll just kind of monitor and mine those dollars accordingly.
Okay. Sorry, Xavier, can you talk about the discovery and some of the stuff that you're doing from that user experience side of things and how you're bringing that into the OTT world?
Sure. So in linear, for linear, and particularly linear live or linear, something that, well, actually just broadly linear, there's not really a lot of discovery needed. We hadn't needed it because you just flip the channels and what's on NBC, what's on CBS. But anytime there's sort of a huge cache of content, you got to figure out how to wade through it. And one great thing about this technology, these new technology platforms, over-the-top technology platforms, is you don't have to go linear. Most of the stuff is on demand, whether it's actually electronic sell-through and it sits somewhere, or if it's streamed to you. So that's great, but even what some of the panelists said earlier, one of the most, Harry in particular said, like, one of the most important things is that we have all this content, and we got to figure out what goes on someone's tray, the 10 that go on someone's tray. And it's not necessarily, it's different, right? It's not just, oh, you like this, and other people like this, therefore we'll like this, and but sometimes it's, we need to promote this show, sometimes this is going to work regionally, sometimes, like all of those types of things. The good news is digital platforms now give you, which everyone knows, it's become cliche now, but now give you an immense amount of data about behavioral data, user data, metadata on the content. So that's actually a very, very good thing, but it's probably also a very challenging thing for the MVPDs, the cable networks, because before you could just be like, there's some programming guy that's like, this is what should be on. And now, say, well, have you looked through the data? And it's hard. It's hard to look through the data. And that's why you need not just these kind of sophisticated algorithms. I actually downplay algorithms. I actually think what you really need is proper data, structured data. And so, we saw this as an opportunity several years ago, and we said, let's create sort of an engine that personal to, like literally personal, one-to-one, can deliver the most appropriate content to a user at any time, at any place, what kind of mood they're in, who's in the room with them, what happened that day, in the same way that you would like your best friend or your husband or your wife. Oh, you know what? Yeah, here are the 3 things you need to know. Imagine if there was just a smart engine that knew that about you. That's what we did.
Awesome.
We came up with that.
Galen, what about you? Do you want to talk about kind of your view on programming and in this space?
Yeah, I would say, he works at a digital platform, I work at a digital platform, so I think we're pretty much in agreement that data drives decision making when it comes to what you're programming in front of your audience. Years ago, you would just talk about segmentation. How are you segmenting your audience and then present content based onto those individual segments? Male, 18 to 34, likes video games. We'll serve them content that's video game related or entertainment news related. Now it's more about addressability, taking the Gracenote methodology. For those of you who don't know, Gracenote is a company that powers the recommendation systems behind iTunes, Rhapsody, Pandora, Spotify. They have a couple hundred people just sitting there writing in the metadata for every song that comes into those systems.
And now a Nielsen company.
Now a Nielsen company, right. And so Nielsen is using that data to figure out how all of these pieces of content are interrelated. Video is a lot more complex than that, particularly because of UGC, but also particularly because nobody's ever bothered to consolidate the method by which you're entering all this metadata. Every company has different metadata that they're entering for every piece of content. So it's a lot more difficult with video. We've gone the addressable route with Dailymotion. We no longer surface UGC within our recommendation algorithms. It's still there, but you have to manually search for it. And because of that, we've been able to increase our engagement 2.5, 3 times in terms of video views per unique viewer, just by having that data there and saying this is premium content. We know what the metadata is, we know it's good metadata, and we're going to use that to inform us on what this individual user should watch based on the media profile they've built around their consumption history.
That's great. So kind of playing off the topic of data, maybe Harry, go to you next. What are the metrics or what are those data points that you guys are looking at? And maybe come to you, George.
It's unique views per user. We look at engagement. How much time they're spending. We'll look at your fall-off rates, how far into a film are people watching, and are they dropping off, and is there a pattern there? Is there, that could help influence programming and merchandising of content. What's important to us is like what is the first thing they start watching after they join, to try and find out what is driving signups.
Have you found any interesting data points that you can share at all, or? Too early?
Nothing that really would be that interesting for us. It's just really tells us what kind of content we want to push front and center. So when a user is checking us out, we want to serve up the content we know that people are the first thing, the top 5 things people are watching, things we want to put up front and center because that seems to be what's driving sign up. So we use those types of metrics to help decide on programming.
Got it.
Beyond that, it's just average playtime, various metrics around engagement and playback.
Sure. George?
Yeah, I guess.
What do you guys use to drive your process?
Right. Well, oftentimes, I guess we look at who we're going to want to build a show around based on their metrics and kind of like what subscriber base they have. But I think beyond subscriber base, it's really about the user engagement that they have with their audience. And that should indicate to us also, in addition to like meeting with them and seeing what they're actually like if they really have a unique POV to what they're doing and if they really have a voice. So we sort of use the metric side of it and the art together to kind of like determine who we want to work with, and then we also take in data from or I guess you would call it data, but just you take in conversations with our buyers and find out what they're looking for and what they feel like is really a space that they need stuff in, and we kind of use that information to develop shows.
How does the process work? Like once you have something launched, and how will that data sort of come back to you and sort of get reapplied into maybe another episode or another series or?
Yeah. Well, I think depending upon what that platform is, it has been a little bit of a black box with some of the platforms. I think the only thing that we've been able to notice is like which shows are getting picked up for a second season in terms of how popular they are, because there aren't really view counts on a lot of these OTT platforms.
Yeah, they're not providing you guys the metrics.
Right. So we kind of use we're a little bit in the dark sometimes on that. But yeah, any platform that has comment availability or using live streaming abilities, then you can incorporate things into your next episode for sure if you're able to produce something in that quick turnaround. Yeah.
Hutch, any other thoughts on data and metrics?
Yeah, there again, you sort of have this sort of duality we talked about earlier, sort of, the wonderful granularity of digital, but then with that granularity comes sort of, a lack of a common currency, for example. Nielsen's been in the space for a long time, obviously on the TV side, but also on the website for a long time, the digital side. ComScore is making good strides. They bought RentTrack a while ago, so they're leveraging set-top box data to, hopefully, arguably get more granular than the old sort of, panel-based Nielsen data. I find I always kind of go back to this idea of sort of a matrix, horizontal, vertical, where most people I talk to with big budgets and, on the network side and the agency side, you sort of imagine sort of the horizontal sort of axis where you sort of need a baseline to, project a campaign, an 8-week, 16-week campaign, and with big brand advertisers, that's real money. And you don't have any choice really other than to kind of reach into the sky for the Nielsen data to say, okay, if it does a 2 rating, we know how that works. If it does a 3 rating, we know how that works. So you can transact against a common currency, and that's why it's so valuable, and which is why Nielsen's not going anywhere. At the same time, the vertical axis, I think, is where you get the wonderful granularity. So to me, it seems like it's a coexistence of the two. And it's a lot of work. The first one's easy, right? You sort of, you do your planning a year in advance. The show runs, your campaign's run, everybody goes and plays golf. And you do the post-analysis and see if you were up or down or kind of where the money got spent, if you hit your numbers or not. But the more responsible marketers, and there are more and more every day, are also taking that vertical dive with those campaigns to capture more of their own granular data, profile data, psychographic data, and so forth, and taking back that stuff in-house, which is why there's been so much pressure on the traditional ad agencies, because they used to do that stuff.
So, kind of building off of that, that sort of predisposes an advertising model. What are sort of, obviously there's a lot of different models that are working right now concurrently in OTT, but let me kind of ask you more from the standpoint of which are the models that are actually working, where people are being successful with and so on?
Well, success, I guess.
Yeah, what's
it's kind of
define it how you will.
A profit margin. If you're actually eking out
above
something
zero.
Yeah. If you're in the black,
terms of
you're
revenue.
successful, right?
I think it
actually, like most VCs, most investors I don't think they care about profit margin. But at least up on Sandhill Road. I think probably still, although it's changing, I think it's really slowly changing. I change it. I strike that. I don't think it's changing. Which is it's user growth. And you know how I can tell it's not yet changing yet? Netflix. Netflix is ridiculously unprofitable, like crazy unprofitable. And at any time, but why are they such a valuable company? And they'll, they're 85 billion today, and people are saying their stock's going to go up like 2 times. But the reason they can support themselves is because Wall Street just continues to believe that the metric of success for video distribution platforms is growth, user growth. The irony is the biggest video distribution platforms right now are actually the MVPDs. Their metric, Wall Street measures them on a different metric. Wall Street measures them on what the old school stuff, which is like EPS and but even like just profit, like what and so I actually think for all the new, that's why I think a lot of the MVP, the traditional media companies are trying their best to get in this new space so that they can get Wall Street to say, oh, don't measure us on profitability, measure us on growth. Look, we had 400,000 users last year. This year we have 2 million. That's pretty good growth, even though we're in the red like $500 million, So that's, I mean, I don't know, you were going to say.
So I was going to say that I think it really, and I've seen this countless times for all the publishers that I've worked with, what really works is focusing on something highly niche and growing from there, growing into additional niches or expanding to related categories. So a great example is IGN. When I first started, their video business made up probably about $9 million per year line of business. I was managing that P&L. By the time I left 2 years later, we were $15 million in revenue per year. And all of that growth came from expanding into the things that we were doing well, expanding those, and then adding on additional related categories, going beyond video game category content to comic book content, entertainment, mostly action type content, and men's lifestyle content, and that grew everything substantially. And we were still able to maintain our Ziff Davis standard of 30% profit margin by doing that. I saw the same thing happen at JibJab when I was there, and the same thing happen at MTV when I was there. So you focus on a small niche that has an endemic, highly passionate audience. You grow that audience, make sure that there's still a passionate audience, and then grow outside of that endemic type content.
I think that's right. There's like MGM is launched their new Stargate website app that's $20 a month, but it's really highly targeted at a super niche audience that's very passionate about it. So it'd be interesting if that really takes off. And it does seem like you want to go. I mean, you see the same thing, esports, maybe soccer, where it's sports that aren't getting covered by sort of the mainstream sports areas, but have like a really passionate audience. That's a way to win. I think we've seen a lot of contraction recently too. I mean, CISO's gone, Comcast Watchable is gone, and I think both of those really gone in almost a year or maybe less. Vimeo didn't even get off the ground, which is interesting. I mean, it seems like if you're going kind of medium, that might not be the thing that's working, or just because there really is a pretty short runway from these people that are backing it, the bigger companies behind it. But then you're also seeing the big players that do have a ton of capital that are going to just make a really big bet.
Well, it definitely seems like it's a play for the long run here. It's still not, quick bucks to be made in it, right? You've got to build that audience or build that presence and footprint. So, Harry, can you talk a little bit about how you guys look at the monetization of what you guys are doing, and is it still sort of a lab project, or is it like
no,
you guys are expected
we are expecting now, especially with rebranding as Hallmark Movies Now.
Yeah.
We're subscription based. We have monthly and annual fees, so we want to see rapid growth, but also be profitable. We're not trying to we're trying to make money, of course. As you were talking about, like, it's not an easy thing to get off the ground. It's not cheap.
Right.
You do have to be in it for the long haul and be willing to lose some money. It's a very expensive thing to start up and run and keep it running 24/7. And then also developing apps that are on every platform people want to be on, want to be watching on. That has a compelling user experience. It has really elegant design. It's not simple, so I can see why some people just can't get off the ground or don't want to stick in, don't have the heart to stick into this for the long haul.
So I mean, a couple of interesting things that come out of those comments.
Yeah.
Because like most media companies are good at creating content and media, not like
Exactly.
you're describing creating apps and different services and all that.
So it takes a very certain level of expertise to build this type of product and commitment. It's not something that a media company has expertise in. You really need a technology division and a true software development division to build this type of thing, or partner with someone who's going to build that for you.
It's also handy to have sort of the pre-existing network as a Barker channel, too.
Exactly.
Subs for Hallmark Channel, 60 million?
Yeah. And then the Hallmark Channel just launched a third channel.
Yeah. So
last
that
week.
footprint is really handy. I mean,
Yeah.
because again, back to that noise level, I mean, it is brutal. And,
we can cross market between the two very easily.
Yeah. And,
So much. That's obviously great for Hallmark, right? But like, here you are, right? You're an independent company with independent content, right?
Yep.
A lot of independent producers here. Like, what's your advice as part of all this? How do you cut through it?
we're not.
What's your strategy, I guess?
We're pretty simple folks. We just look to kind of find where the money is. We have a little niche in the syndication business. And again, my background has been traditional, digital, back and forth. And the current company, PPI Releasing, we started about 10 years ago just mining a niche for high quality Canadian program. Not all Canadian. We did a game show with Merv Griffin a couple of years ago and some court shows. But after a couple of economic shakeouts in 2008, 2009, we just sort of found that if we could just hand select high quality programming, sometimes the scripted dramas, like procedural crime dramas, sometimes a panel talk show, entertainment news shows, and just finding out, because we're very close to the stations and groups in this country in terms of what they need to fill their time with, we kind of go out and find them and help them do that. And some of our shows are Nielsen rated, some are not. But we're sort of in this, as sort of broadcasters in the old school, but with an eye toward digital, of course, like everybody else. Just kind of like Mr. Wolf in Pulp Fiction, we're sort of solving pain. We sort of show up to the Sinclairs and the Tribunes and the Nextstars to kind of, because they still need programming.
Yeah.
And they're expanding their news, rotations, but the stuff coming out of the studios, is very few and far between now because the numbers aren't there, and so the studios aren't going to put in the big dollars because they're not going to get the cash license fees from the station, and so we're just finding a nice little niche there, and then wherever it makes sense, we will extend the signal. We will either do it ourselves or allow our station partners to have the rights to extend over their mobile and OTT platforms within their DMAs.
Got it. Galen.
Yeah, listening to Dave talk about that, I kind of want to amend my how to become successful process. I think
you and Xavier back there keep changing.
Well, it's.
We're all gonna switch it.
I think changing my head. It just comes after it comes out of my head.
I think having endemic content and growing from there is one path to success. There's another company that's done extraordinarily well just by focusing on the highest quality and the highest production quality of content available in probably the entire world. And that's HBO. They've done so phenomenally well with that, and they've taken over their own OTT distribution through HBO Go and HBO Now, which have become highly successful. I'm a cord never, and I subscribe to that service quite frequently. I do it like 4 or 5 months out of the year, turn it off, turn it back on. And beyond that, I think it becomes as an OTT service, it becomes volume of content as well. So what's the first? If you guys are gonna look for a short form video, what's the first destination you go to? YouTube, right? You don't go to Dailymotion. You go to Vimeo. You go to YouTube. If you're going to look for a high-quality piece of original programming through an SVOD service, usually the first destination you go to is Netflix. They have the volume. So if you're the one destination with a tremendous amount of volume, despite what Xavier said about profitability, meeting that metric of user growth and total volume of users, the amount of content you have and the quality of it are really important.
Yeah. So I wanted to. So I want to disagree with everyone on the panel. So, no, here's why. But not the last part you said. The part about the niche content. And obviously, with all due respect to everyone on the panel, because who knows? By the way, we're all just bullshitting, right? So like, we don't know if any of this is gonna like happen, or not, right? So this is my bullshit. So I think the niche business. There were a few like niche content players. Like, let's go after this this one market that's really into it. Like, and they got there pretty early. Crunchyroll, I think, is the best example. For those of you guys who don't know Crunchyroll, it's an anime channel. So it was a company that just essentially aggregated a bunch of anime video content over the top. Subscription based. So they charged, I don't even know what the number was, $10, $12, and they are profitable. That's a very, very good business. I think that's rare, and I think it's going to become even rarer. And the reason is because in the over-the-top content distribution space, it's expensive. It's not expensive to enter. That's the thing. That's why all of us here probably believe that we can start a service or a blog, because the barriers to entry are super easy. We never thought that, like we'll start our own cable access maybe back in the day, but even that was kind of hard, right? But now anyone can. The barriers to entry are really low. So if you have an idea, or if you have a background, I used to be an exec at some place, therefore give me money, VCs, and I'm going to like attack this niche. Here's the problem. The problem is exactly what Gail said. Well, there's many problems. But problem one is that you need, if you're going to charge even $5 a month, it better not be for one. Even if the user's into it, like one series or one short form series or something like that, it better be high quality stuff like HBO. But by the way, HBO, it doesn't even have just one, right? If HBO. If it, what is it, $14.99 now a month, right? If HBO had just like, and each one of us is different, right? Like, so for me, actually I'm probably not that different because I love probably Game of Thrones and like what everyone loves, right? But if they just had one show, I'd have to really think about, do I really want to pay $14.99 a month? But they don't. They have at least, if I subscribe $14.99 a month, I know that I'm going to have 4, 5, 6 programs that I'm actually kind of into. And here's the deal: to get 4, 5, 6 programs that you're into, do you know how friggin' expensive it is? That's like a content business. That's like, oh, let's spend a whole bunch of money and hope we'll have some sort of hits, right? That costs a lot of money. The other thing that costs a lot of money, which people never talk about at these panels, or in these places, the infrastructure. Yeah. The number one cost for Netflix and Facebook, you know what it is? Yes, servers. Yep. Servers, bandwidth, and all that kind of stuff. So imagine a business with a high variable cost to growth. So, I mean, literally, so high variable cost to growth, you have to spend a lot of money. No one's going to just come to you initially. No one's going to come to you initially and just say, hey, your original content, it means something to us. You have to actually lure them in with some branded content, which means you have to license. So this formula of a lot of money, where does that come? I got it. This formula for, dude, I've like let everyone talk. That's before. This formula for a lot of money, who has a lot of money and has a long time horizon that can afford to like show losses for a long time? It's the media companies.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's the media companies that are going to win. Sorry, go ahead.
No. All good stuff. Just want to give everyone else a chance as we're running out of time. So guys, last quick question, sort of a quick rapid fire answer. Really, where does all this go next? What's next for you guys with OTT? So start with you, George. We'll go down the line.
Man, I'll be interested to hear what everybody says. It is like crystal ball time. Yeah.
Yeah, crystal ball time.
I think that as I mentioned, I think the big players, anybody who's investing a lot of money into the space is going to come out on top. But I do still feel like there are niche communities that you can hit. But to your point, you do need to have like something that's going to keep people coming back. And the other big challenge there too is you're not only marketing a new show, you're marketing a new platform that people have to adopt somehow. So you got to factor that into your cost as well. But there could also be more in that niche space. There could also be more kind of like direct to creator funding. I think that could work.
Cool. I like that idea. Harry, what about you? Where does all this go for you guys?
I mean, for us, it's continued growth. We are one of those niche services, but we have the luxury of being backed by Hallmark, which is doing quite well. So it's not like we're starting from scratch. We have a channel. We have 3 channels, behind us now with Hallmark channel. So for us, it's going to be leveraging that, because this is now, as we're transitioning from Feelin to Hallmark movies now as the service, there's a lot more opportunity now for us to grow even bigger. And even though we'll always still be this niche service, we can have an opportunity to be one of those services like Crunchyroll that can really grow and serve serve an audience that is clamoring for that kind of content and something that's different than other competitors. And we also have something that they know what they're going to get just by the name alone. Yeah. So they don't have to wonder what is this service. They know who we are just by the name.
And I think you also mentioned that your content's only going to be on your, in essence,
yeah,
OTT channel.
I mean, the Hallmark channel content is created. It's our own content, so
you control it.
There's a lot more control over that. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Hutch, what about you? Where does all this go?
80-20 rule. I mean, biggest server wins. That's where we're headed. I don't think it's a big surprise. Hallmark is a good example of a good, strong brand, but they'll probably be in that 80 part. But I think if we look around, we would probably all agree. And again, folks like Jaron Lanier, Douglas Rushkoff, I mean, biggest server wins. The oligarchs will be the 20 or maybe the 10, maybe it's the 90-10, but that's where it's headed. Sooner or later, it all kind of gets rolled up because, again, this sort of power law sort of accelerated by network effects. Bigger server wins. That's where we're headed.
So you're basically saying Amazon wins.
It's going to be a GAF, Google, Amazon, Facebook. I think that's where it's headed. Apple will be in there somewhere. Microsoft will be in there somewhere. But basically an 80-20 structure because it's inevitable. I mean, we've now reached in the cloud an organic sort of, again, power law environment where that's inevitable, I think.
Galen, where's it going?
First, I think it depends on net neutrality. Everything will change significantly if net neutrality is not maintained. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest issue of our industry. Assuming it does maintain its current course, which is we still have net neutrality, more consolidation by the MVPDs of content companies, potentially platforms among them, more consolidation of content companies acquiring platforms, and more content companies creating self-service properties for SVOD services, like HBO and all the other networks have done.
Xavier.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You get to wrap up, man.
Yeah, well, I think what Galen and David said is right, and that's kind of where I was going earlier, which is the way that this is going to look. The only people that can afford to stay in the game are going to be the media companies, and now the new media companies, which are the Facebooks and the Googles. But the Facebooks and Googles are making so much money on advertising, that they'll take their time to get into this space. And same thing with Amazon, which they have a long-term view. And it's funny, it will look exactly like the old media space, meaning the same players. It'll just be, it'll be Disney, and it'll be, Viacom maybe not, but like it'll be like some
NBC, Comcast.
yeah, it'll be
Netflix.
yeah, they'll just shift over, and we will still be giving our every month our money to these companies, but it will be delivered in a different way with hopefully a better experience.
Great. Well, guys, we're out of time here. So if you guys have questions, maybe some of the panelists will stick around for a few minutes. But with that, I want to thank you guys all for coming. And let's give a big round of applause for George, Harry, Hutch, Galen, and Xavier. Thank you guys all, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, guys.